use of taxpayer money. It's not good customer service. So we want to move away from that model. And what I've seen in my 14 months is a lot of my federal peers are looking in that same way. And I can certainly tell you, the federal CIOs who's at Kent and other people, that's exactly how they're looking at the world. And so we're trying to keep up. We want to be one of the leaders in doing that. The last thing that I want to talk then, of course, is workforce. This is an important one. A couple of quick things on that. Again, I already mentioned customer service, which to me is the most important piece of that. But one of the things I'm looking at with my workforce is understanding how do I prepare my workforce for when I talk about modernization and managing data, how do I have a workforce that's prepared to do that? I'm a big believer in this idea of storytelling. When you go out to customers, understanding what they're doing, being able to talk in non-geek language to a customer, understand what their needs are, and then kind of explain back to them how you can help them. So we're trying to do some work on that idea of storytelling with my team. Sometimes people call these things soft skills. They may be soft skills, but they're pretty valuable. And so we're trying to build a workforce that can do that a lot better. As we go in the road towards managed services, towards cloud services, the work that my federal workforce, and I think most of the federal workforce is going to do, it's going to change dramatically. I don't think that's a shock to anybody in here. They're going to move into things like business requirements, business analysis, business process flows, managing service level agreements. These are things that many folks in private sector have done for quite a while. They're a little bit new to us, unfortunately, in federal government. But that's where we're going. That's where the Department of Energy is going. And so I'm trying to prepare my workforce for that world because that's the work they're going to do. Now, I still am going to need some technical skills. At the end of the day, I'm still going to need a core technical workforce that understands technology enough that, frankly, they can hold everybody accountable. When I'm working with other people, when we're validating innovation and new technologies, I still need that core workforce that has enough technical acumen that they can give us proper feedback and guidance on where to go next. So I don't want to diminish that part of it because that's still going to be very important for our workforce for a long time. We're always going to need some of those core people in government, but they're not going to be, again, doing the same things. They're not going to be out there, managing servers in a federal data center anymore. They're going to be out, hopefully, doing innovation. They're going to be doing pilot testing. They're going to be out in the field. They're going to be doing sort of the real work to deliver innovation to customers. That's where we're trying to go. We're just on the starting path of that road. I think we're fortunate. I know a number of my colleagues around federal government are a little bit farther in that road. We've got a lot of our friends at the national labs who are farther down that road. And so we're trying to work with them very closely to understand better how they're doing that and how we can bring that capability into what we're doing, just at my headquarters down on Independence Avenue. So that's how we're looking at the world, and just in terms of PMA. A couple other real quick things I want to mention to you all. One of them, I think you saw the National Cybersecurity Strategy that just came out. That's certainly critical for us as the sector-specific agency for the energy sector. This is critical to us. Right? Cybersecurity is critical to me, not only because it's important, not only because I've spent a good amount of my career working in cybersecurity, but because we're the sector-specific agency, we're charged with protecting that important part of our critical infrastructure. We just got our new Assistant Secretary, Karen Evans, who's really focused in that area. And what I know and what my leadership knows is our credibility with our private sector partners is only as good as my capability. If I'm not doing the right thing, if I'm not eating my own dog food, as we say, then our private sector partners are not going to take us seriously. Right? And this has frankly been a persistent problem for us in federal government when we want to talk to everybody about cybersecurity. If we're not doing it well, if we're not following our own rules and our own guidance, we can't possibly expect people to take us seriously. And so that's been one of our key focus areas for the secretary of the department. It was important enough to him to put in a new assistant secretary in a new office just to focus on that with our private sector partners. But what I know and what I've been told as I've been there is my role in making sure we have credibility for that role is equally important. And so we want to make sure not only are we doing things well, but when we actually do something well, we want to share those best practices. We want to make sure that people actually do look at the department as being one of the leaders in cybersecurity and government. I think it's, if you have not looked at that national cybersecurity strategy, I would recommend you do it. There are some things we've talked about before, but I think there's some new emphasis in some important areas. I will tell all of you, I know there's a ton of people here in the private sector in our vendor community. You will see there is an emphasis in there specifically on the protection of contractor systems. a large part of what we get done in federal government is because of people like the people in this room, right? At my agency, we are absolutely dependent on our contract and private sector partners to get everything we do done. On operations, on customer service, on security. We are absolutely dependent on our private sector partners who bring capability that we don't have to the table. And so it's important then, because you are now part of my risk. Whether you want it to be or not, if you're one of my contractors, you're part of the family and you're part of that risk. And you'll see that very heavily acknowledged in that strategy, that we're all going to have to look at this together. We're all in this together. And so there's a lot of work to be done on what that looks like, right? There's a lot of work to be done on how do we understand and manage that risk as a community, right? It can't just be federal and contractor. We're all in that together. So I would urge you to look at that, because they've just got the starting point of that, but there's a lot of work and a lot of conversation that's going to go into that. And you all in the private sector, as the contractors, as the vendors, you have to be a part of that conversation. It doesn't work without you, and so it's important that you're part of that conversation. So I would really urge you to make sure through, ACT-IACT is a good spot. ELC, you're going to have some of the people involved in that. There are a lot of different avenues for you to be involved, and you're going to have to be, for us to be successful as a federal government. So a couple other things I want to say, since I've got a captive audience of a lot of folks that are contractors and vendors in the vendor community here. So I myself, I worked in small business. I worked in pretty large integrator before. So I've been on sort of your side of the table. So a couple of things I think you can do to help. Look, one of the challenges, again, I've been in government, I've been outside of government as a contractor, I've been on both sides of the table. One of the challenges I knew walking into my job, you may have heard of the Stockdale principle. It's named after Admiral Stockdale. So it's this idea of if you're gonna succeed, if you're gonna go through rough times, you have to be able to have the cognitive dissonance of you've got to be completely realistic about how bad things really are, about how tough your challenges are, and yet you've still got to maintain a belief that you can go through them and come out on the other side. Right? And Admiral Stockdale, if you know, I believe is the longest held prisoner of war in Vietnam. And this is what he talked about for him to come out on the other side. He talked about the folks who didn't make it were the ones who either walked in overly optimistic, right? And we've all seen these people in federal government, right? They walk in, bushy-tailed, wide-eyed, and think they're going to change the world, right? They come in overly optimistic, and when they see how tough things are in the long haul, they get discouraged and they walk away. And then we've seen the other side where people walk in and they become so quickly, their skepticism turns to cynicism, and then they throw in the towel and they'll just sit it out. Right? They may sit there forever. Well, I can't change it, so I'm not going to. I'm going to go along with whatever's broken and failed. Right? So what I would ask you to do, like Admiral Stockdale was, what we have to do is we need to be very open and honest about the challenges and problems, but we've got to have some kind of belief that we can start to make progress and get to the other side. If we don't do that, we're not going to get anywhere. Right? And so I'll tell you, as I approach some of this stuff, I've told my team, they've heard from me repeatedly, I don't take no for an answer. Right? And I don't take the first no, or the second no, or the third no. Right? We're going to keep pushing. I don't want to know what we did before. I want to know where we're going. And so I would ask some of you to that. So one of the things I would ask you, a bit of a radical ask to be honest, I would ask all of you to be honest with us, your federal customers. And I say that knowing full and well how hard that is. I've been a contractor. I get it. Right? We simply want to keep the customer happy. We want to keep our contract. Right? I understand that pressure, I do. But we are not going to change things. I've also been that frustrated contractor who had to sit there and watch repeated failures, who had to sit and work in a job where it was like, where I was banging my head on the wall with 100 ways we could do things better, but no one wants to listen. I've been on that side of it. But what I would ask you is don't give up on that. Please, I need you to be open and honest with the government as you work with us about how we change things. Right? And that's a radical ask, right? Because I know, unfortunately, there's people who don't take bad news very well sometimes. And they don't take somebody giving them open and honest feedback very well sometimes. I understand that. But I ask you, that's how we're going to change things. And I believe, frankly, most of you are probably like me, you want to change things. You want to see a successful federal government. Not just because it's going to make your life better and easier as a contractor, but as your citizens and taxpayers. You want to see us move in the right direction. You want to see us make this thing better. But it's not going to do that if we all just sort of say, well, it's never going to get fixed anyway, so I'm just going to keep going. We can't keep doing that. We can't. Right? So I would ask you to find some ways to take that step, to give that honest feedback. Right? And I say that knowing full well how hard it is. But we've got to start doing that. If we don't, we're not going to get anywhere. Right? So, and as we're moving to things like managed services and things like that, I'm going to need people who are going to help me do that, who are going to be honest with us, because one of the failings I've seen across government in general, and I will certainly say for us, is we do such a poor job of gathering business requirements, a poor job of understanding what we're really trying to accomplish, which then of course leads to broken task orders, broken contracts that go through a broken acquisition process that lead to broken government. Right? So we've got to start to, that's the broken government kill chain. Right? We got the cyber kill chain, that's the government kill chain. So we've got to start breaking that at certain places. Right? On the government side, one of those, frankly, is we've got to do a lot better job of giving proper business requirements, of actually understanding what are we trying to accomplish. You know, and again, I worked in big and small business, and so one of the things I want us to do is, I'd love for us to get to a more mature place in government. There's some contracts and tasks that really need a large company, right? They need a company that's got a big bench that does certain things at scale. That's great. There's a lot of other things that if we did our job well in government, if we really built our requirements, if we really scoped it down and understood what we're trying to get to, where small business excels, where the customer service, the specialized skills, some of the unique things that a small business brings to the table, that they are absolutely ready-made for. And we do a terrible job in government. Instead, what we usually try and do is we just take a large contract, we sort of squish it and squeeze it and then throw it out to a small business. And then they're just drowning trying to keep up with it. And I've watched that happen. Right? What we should be doing is breaking up things into appropriate levels of task and the kind of tasks that small businesses excel at. Because there's some of them that a small business is always going to be better because they're more agile. They're quicker. Right? And so I want to make sure that we're doing that, and we're doing that breakout, and we're putting contracts where they belong appropriately, very frankly. But that's going to require a lot of us in the government to start to do that kind of work, to really start to do those sort of business requirements and break them down appropriately. So we've got some work to do. We need your help to do it. You know, I think having said all that, again, you know, you all can help us by, you know, making sure that we're all trying to move in the right direction together. ACT-IACT is great. There's other entities like that that let us all sort of work together in government and private sector together, which I greatly appreciate. So that's why I want to make time to come speak at this. That's why I'm going to ELC. That's why I've got other colleagues that go do that, because it is an opportunity for us to work together, because that's really how we're going to solve a lot of the problems we have is together. Right? No one in government knows enough, and no one in private sector knows enough to just go magically fix things. We're going to have to sit and do these things together, collaboratively as a group, and we can. Right? I've been in this town 18 years. I've met just amazing people, both in government and private sector, and so there's a lot of things that we can all sort of bring to the table together. And so that's just a quick sort of roadmap of where I am and where we're trying to go at Department of Energy. We've got a lot of work to do. We got a long road on some of those things, but I'm very thankful we've started to make progress. You know, if people ask me, my biggest piece of success, very frankly, are I've got leadership support. I've got support from the secretary, who I report to, and our deputy secretary, who's actively involved on a regular basis with me and our team, who's actively involved in asking questions and understanding what we're doing, who has signed off on all sorts of things I've put in front of him to help us move in the right direction as a department. And that's really been, frankly, in all honesty, probably one of the most critical parts of any success that I've had in 14 months has been that leadership support. There's a lot of other work and a lot of our team that are part of that too, but that leadership success, you know, I have to be honest, without that, it's a really tough road for anybody. So that's sort of my initial stuff. So I wanted to do is, again, there's folks in here who know I could talk all day if you let me, but I did want to open it up just to have some questions. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to talk those. Hi.
I'm George Smith from Signature Consulting Group. My question for you is really... Thank you. George Smith from Signature Consulting Group. My question for you, actually, is off the top of your head, if you had to look out over the IT systems for which you are responsible, what percentage of your work today, your production systems, are in the cloud, and what do you think that percentage number would be 3 years from today?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Right now, aside from cloud email, we have a very small amount. So, and again, I'll step back and say, if you look at Department of Energy, there's never one answer because we are so confederated. So if you go to some of my labs, they've got really significant workloads in the cloud today, right now. Now, my labs will never be able to move all of that because they're doing high performance computing, mission computing. They've got certain parameters. We've also, of course, got the NNSA that does the nuclear mission. There's some things that they're simply, none of us are going to be comfortable with them ever putting in the cloud. In between there, we've got this vast ocean of we've got a lot of labs whose entire business model is public information, right? We have labs that are essentially user facilities for people around the globe to come and do some of the most breakthrough science in the world. And so, and they have started putting some of that in the cloud, probably not at a pace I would like, and I'm actually trying to make it easier for them to do that. So then I step back and look at what I'll call my federal footprint. And we are literally, I mean, we don't even have probably 5% in the cloud, if that. And there's different reasons for that. Again, a lot of it has to do with that confederacy of things. There has not been, in different ways, some of the uniformity and some direction from our leadership that we've had before that wants to go there. And look, everybody, a lot of people get scared of the cloud, right? The cloud's not more risk, it's just different risk, that's all. It's a different kind of risk, but if you don't know that risk, if you don't understand it, right? If you don't have real capability in access control and management and in change configuration, because that's where a lot of your cloud risk lives, if you don't know that well, if you're not comfortable with it, that looks like, hey, I'm just going to stick with what I've done, right? And all of us everywhere have got server huggers who don't want to give up the iron, and so you're constantly having to fight that. So I'm trying to find some ways to sort of